I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. 2 things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to, this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer, or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days, and his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. Me and Diamara, she is 12 years old, have had a rough summer. She's been more defiant than usual. I've been dating her mom Mara for 2 years now. 9 months ago, they moved in with me, Maple. Both Dio and Mara have an on-again / off-again relationship with Dio's dad, Dionysus. He's pretty much never paid child support, comes and goes as he pleases into Dio's life. Typical shitty-ass part-time dad. I've tried to fill the dad role in her life, while still understanding boundaries, taking things slow, etc. This summer Dionysus decides he wants to be a real dad and takes Dio in for a month. Good for him, not my business, and Mara agrees. When Dio came back home because school started, she was a lot different. Really mean to me, very dismissive. A few days ago she got caught shoplifting at the mall. Security took her in, then called Mara, who didn't answer, then called Dionysus, who didn't answer, and finally me. I answered. They told me I had to pick her up or she'll be handed over to juvenile. I didn't say anything to her while I picked her up. I apologized to security, apologized to the store. I even tipped the security guards plus the store employees because it's up, they had to deal with that. I assured them Dio would be punished appropriately. I'm speaking to her in a strong, affirmative voice while we're in the car. Not yelling, but in a fatherly tone, I suppose. I'm telling her how up it is to steal, and how I don't. With thieves, and how I absolutely don't voluntarily. With any kind of police, so I don't appreciate any of this, nor will I accept it in my house. She snaps back that I'm not her dad, so don't ever tell her what to do. From now on, if I want to tell her something, I need to clear it with her real father first. That killed my soul. For the past year or so, I've treated her as my own daughter. I've paid for their housing, I've paid for her mom's car, her schooling, her food, everything. Her bio dad dropped $100 check off one time in the past year. In check bounced, so I had to call him up and he brought cash over. I told Mara about all of this. She was appalled at what Dio said, but she never made Dio apologize because she's not wrong, you're not her dad. A couple of days later, Dio asks me for some money to pay for her uniform / accessories she needs for a sport she's involved in. I say, go ask your dad. She scoffs and says her dad doesn't have the money for it, so I have to pay for it. I tell her, I'm not her dad, so don't ever tell me what I have to pay for. She cried to Mara, who tells me I'm not being an adult about the situation. Mind you, I never received an apology or a thanks for our entire previous situation. Mara says Dio is a kid and I need to stop acting like a kid too. I own a small condo in Orlando. I bought it while working for the Mouse, and my friend Ben lived there with me. Ben's a cook and is rarely home. He has a large room that is accessible from outside and attached bathroom that locks to the rest of the house. Well, I got a different job, got engaged to my partner, and moved a few hours away. We kept the condo as a place to stay when we visit the parks. And we agreed with Ben that he could continue living there as long as he paid all the utilities and maintained the place. Our friends use it too, they pay a bit for utilities, are told don't bother Ben, and clean before they leave. Between everyone who uses it, we've gotten stuff donated, so it's now a fully stocked vacation home. My immediate family and I have a bad history, but we mended. They've used the condo 3//4x a year. On Monday, Ben got woken up at 2 a.m. by hammering on the main door. My aunt and uncle, their kids, and their grandkids were all there waiting to be let in. I haven't spoken to these people in years after they decided I was the devil's spawn for being gay. They demanded that the caretaker give them the keys. Ben called me. I told him to give them my number, then shut and lock the door and not let them in. My aunt was insistent that my condo was actually owned by my family. It was the family vacation home. And it was against the law to not let them in. I told her no, it was mine, I own it and I let friends and family use it, but I choose who stays there. There was a lot of back and forth and some petty name calling. She said they were here for a week, where were they supposed to go, and I said I don't care. Meanwhile, my partner reported that Ben texted them saying my uncle was attempting to kick in the door. I said tell him to call the police. She hung up on me and Ben said they left. In the morning I got a phone call from my mom trying to convince me to let them stay. We had an argument during which she admitted that she didn't tell people that I owned the property, because she didn't want the rest of our family to know they were in contact with me again. I told her if that's how she wants our relationship to be, then she's no longer welcome. I checked in with Ben and he's okay. Today my aunt sent several texts asking to stay at the house because they hadn't accounted having to pay for a hotel, and they had planned to just buy groceries and use the kitchen. I told her no. She said they were about to be out on the street with their luggage. She called me cruel and heartless and that I was ruining Disney for the kids. That made me hesitate, probably because I worked for the Mouse. I know that particular family line has very little money. Yet I find it hard to believe someone would plan a whole vacation without accounting extra funds for it. But the kids are really young. I'm so furious over the homophobia that it feels like a point of pride to deny them access. Usually for Thanksgiving, we head out to go see family. Someone else always hosts. We typically help sponsor the host by paying for cleanup, etc. Our home is just too small to host the 30+ folks who typically show up through the day. This year that's obviously not happening. Other than us talking about not doing the usual, Thanksgiving didn't come up until yesterday. My kids have the week off from online school. And I was doing a puzzle with them before dinner when my husband walks in after work and says, "So did we get a turkey?" I looked at him and said, "Well, I know I didn't." "Did you?" He stared at me blankly and said, "No." "What do you mean? Do we need to get one still? Is it being delivered?" I shrugged and said, "I don't know nothing about no turkey." The kids and he looked so confused, so I helped them along and said, "I didn't buy anything. I didn't plan anything. No one said anything to me about Thanksgiving. Nobody offered to help meal plan, cook anything, do anything." He blew up yelling at me about how I should have obviously known. I said, "Why? I've literally never planned or made a Thanksgiving dinner in my life. The most I've ever done was help clean up or maybe peel the potato." I asked him why didn't he plan anything, why didn't the kids plan anything? Why is everyone waiting until the last minute and dumping it on me? He just sputtered and yelled and stormed off to his office and left me with the kids. We all had dinner, the kids cleaned up, and I was relaxing with some wine and a book after they all went to bed. My husband tore into me about how he can't believe I left this all to the last minute. Now there will be no Thanksgiving. How could I be heartbroken to do this to the kids, etc. So I just looked at him and said, "Why didn't you plan? Why did you wait to the last minute to ask me?" He told me I was being a for no reason and stomped off to go sleep in his office. He left without saying a word this morning. I followed up with my kids and asked them if they wanted Thanksgiving. They said they didn't care because the food isn't that good most of the time anyway. I work as well. We split chores, but there's no hard line. I do some, he does some. We both cook, and the oldest cooks as well. I just don't get why Thanksgiving is on my plate. Why, just because I'm a woman? A lot of people seem to think that my kids are like toddlers or something. They're old enough to help make the menu for dinners, help with cooking, etc. Anyway, I told my husband that if he wants to do some traditional Thanksgiving with all the fattening, carby, salty, beige food, he can go ahead and plan it and I'll help in the same capacity as always. If he wants me and the kids to cook something together, aka a normal, average Thursday, I'll continue with what was scheduled. The kids genuinely do not care. Thanksgiving doesn't mean anything to them. One of them has been asking for us to stay home for years. One of them barely touches the food as it, and the other one only likes to go so she can see her cousins. And she sees them all the time anyway. The middle kid already dug out another puzzle for us and they're just happy they're off school. Also, we don't do Christmas.